It's a new world now. What can you do today to drive incredible value and fun and prosperity and engagement with your customers and with their customers?
I'm Rachel Bronstein, and this is Digital Transformation Behind the Curtain. In this series, you'll hear how innovative thinking strengthens customer relationships and improves the workplace. Welcome back to the Microsoft Partner Network podcast. Today, I am joined by Bob Evans, who is the founder and principal at Evans Strategic Communications. Hey there, Bob.
Morning. How are you, Rachel?
Well, it's great to talk to you. You've had such a wealth of experiences, Bob. Chief Communications Officer at Oracle, VP Strategic Communications at SAP. Please tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got to where you are today.
Oh, Rachel, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you. I've had a chance over a lot of years to watch the tech industry grow and change, how it affects, how we live, play, work, all of that. It changes in the business world. And it's just been exciting both from a media perspective and also from a corporate perspective. Now working for myself, and I just enjoy immensely watching the changes in the world around us and getting a chance to talk about those. And
you told me that you're the youngest of 5 brothers, which must have been pretty crazy, and you have to have really good communication skills for that, huh?
Yeah, Rachel, I'm sorry. I want to be sure I get this right, because if any of them hears this and I'm wrong, they'll be hell to pay. But there were 4 older, 1 younger, but they're all bigger than me. So quickly, I had to learn how to navigate my way around that in communications way. So yeah, I think that was part of the good training growing up there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can't become, handpicked by some of these CEOs to lead communications without really a deep understanding of the consumer and how do you bring value. Can you talk a little bit about that? And in this age of quote unquote digital transformation, what does that mean, and how does communication play such a vital part of it?
Yeah, Rachel, I think I think I take a backseat to no one in my admiration for the type of technology the world's created and the people who created those amazing skills. But I am not a technologist, and I never have been. And I think that distance gives me a little bit of an ability to look more at the changes that the technology brings rather than being so focused on the technology itself. And I think that's why, as you mentioned, a couple of those CEOs had wanted to see if I could come in and help them talk to the world a little bit differently. So I think one of the things that I think is so interesting now, because there is, as you use that term, digital transformation among the companies, but it's, of course, being driven by individuals. So the striving on the part of it's truly billions of people around the world to live digital lifestyles or increasingly digital lifestyles is forcing businesses then to keep pace with what's going on with individuals. So I think that's fascinating to see how that happens.
Well, right. I mean, the consumer behavior where we're so used to getting something with literally a tap of the finger is starting to really affect how businesses have to behave and respond quick, right? It's the consumers are almost those B2C activities are driving a harder push for partners and businesses. They got to work faster because expectations are so high from these amazing consumer brands.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rachel, I think it's fun too to look at it that businesses that for 50 or 100 or even 200 years have been in this category called B2B. And, like a trained elephant, they sat there, they stayed there, they didn't attempt to go left or right. I'm in the B2B world and I'm in this box, or I'm in a certain industry. Well, if the industry starts to die, companies used to stay there and die along with that industry. But I think today, the move to digital is allowing these companies to make that leap out of that silo from B2B. You see a lot of big B2B companies now also going B2C. They want to have direct links with their customers, and their customers are demanding to have direct links with them. So it's forcing these companies to change the type of products they make, how they present themselves to the world, how they engage with consumers, how they deal with partners up and down the line. And it's really remarkable that the old world where you were sort of, told what your role would be and, do this, don't do that, don't lift your head up and, make sure you play your part. Whereas today it's a little bit more of a free-for-all, right? And companies that were once distributors are now retailers. They also make things. They do online selling. And consumers are less interested in somebody's pedigree than they are who can get me what I want, where I want it, how I want it, and customized to my demand. So really up and down the line, everything's been turned upside down.
You have some really interesting articles out there, Bob, around what's going on in the industry and how digital transformation is affecting some of these small players and big players. Can you talk a little bit about, and you don't need to flaunt Microsoft by any means, but what is the pulse that's happening in these quote unquote cloud wars that you talk about?
Yeah, that series I started about 10 months ago was interesting. I think that there's a lot of really, really deep technical coverage of what's going on in the cloud. And I think in some business media, some people, try to understand what's going on there. But the real heart of it, I think what was going on was that these cloud products, they're interesting in themselves. But what's 10 times more interesting is how are they helping businesses do things those businesses could never do before? So you see both brand new, relatively brand new. I mean, Salesforce is 19 years old, Workday's 10 or 11 years old, but those are sort of the newbies, these pure cloud companies. So they're in there and they're seen as sort of the cool kids on the block. Then you have a company like Microsoft or Oracle or SAP. They're about 40 years old, and they're seen as sort of the stuffy old great aunts or great uncles at a party, and they're trying to be cool, but they're most people assume they're not. And then you got IBM, who's 100 years old, and they're all reworking everything that they do and how they come to the world. And the cloud's giving a chance for these companies that were seen as legacy to become really modern, engage with developers more effectively, and have a completely different set of relationships with customers, helping those customers do extraordinary things to become the digital businesses they want to be. So I think, again, this digital world has given new lease on life to companies, whether they're brand new or 10 or 20 years old or 40 or 100. It's given everybody a little bit more of a level playing field to say, it's a new world now. What can you do today to drive incredible value and fun and prosperity and engagement with your customers and with their customers?
Absolutely. What is your opinion on refreshing your business, modernizing in that way then?
Yeah, I thought, Rach, that was the most interesting of the questions that we had talked about here. So one of it is, there's one point that says in the past that sellers controlled things because they, the old notion that knowledge is power. Well, the sellers held the knowledge about what they made, when it was scheduled, when you could buy it, how you could buy it. My generation grew up where you could go to a bank and they had banker's hours. They were open Monday to Friday from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And that was it. We were stuck. You either banked during those hours or you didn't do any banking. So one of the things that's happened with all of this is businesses have had to totally drop that attitude, and they had to put the customer at the center of all their thinking. How they plan, how they develop products, how they price them, how they compete, how they market, everything like that. So to me, that's been the most remarkable change, is that instead of the seller setting the rules, today it's the buyer who sets the rules. And the most successful companies are using technology to reframe and recreate themselves in this way of putting the buyer, the customer, the consumer at the center of everything, and then building their company, retrofitting their company backward around that. You mentioned Microsoft a minute ago. I think that one of the premier things that Satya Nadella has done in his 4 remarkable years at the company has been he has brought that entire massive organization to be totally focused on customers. And how do we accelerate value to customers? How do we accelerate new opportunities, new levels of engagement for customers? And it just wasn't that way in the past. So that's sort of a standard that I think Microsoft is setting for other tech companies to have to measure up to.
What do you think that it's so much easier to say that you're customer obsessed and to put customers in the center than to be it? How do you actually create a business that is customer obsessed? What sort of, what do you do from a communication standpoint?
Well, that's really the easy part, I think, on the communications end, right? Because if the company is that way, then it's great, wonderful, easy stories to write. You're reflecting reality. If the company isn't that way, and they ask a communications person, make us seem, customer obsessed, it's like that joke that at the end, a guy's got a donkey in a headlock and he's pounding it on the head and saying, be a rabbit. Well, that's just not how the laws of physics work. But those companies, to get to that state where they really deliver the customer obsession, it's everything. And those changes have to be led from the CEO on down, rigorously, comprehensively. No parts of the company are left out of this. And I think you see a lot of business leaders today, Rachel, who say, hey, this customer obsessed thing, I'm all for it, but not my part of the company. Change everything else, but not me. It has to affect, start with salespeople in some way. What are you paying them to do? Delight the customer or get money out of the customer's wallet? Are you charging and putting the marketing people out there to talk about how wonderful your company is, or are they talking about the great experiences they can help create for customers? Do the product people have closed minds to customer feedback, or are they willing to engage customers in the co-creation of great new products and services? Do the service people on a phone call, are they being given the incentive to get those people off the line as quickly as possible, or are they trying to use those service calls to win the hearts and minds of somebody who might otherwise have had a bad experience? So it's really a complete 360 mindset, and any part of that 360 degree that isn't in phase, that company is going to have a problem.
Do you have any examples that you think are really best in class, or even in some of these realms that you talked about, because you're really talking about all different functions of the company that need to be transformed?
Yeah. Well, Rachel, here's one. Remember Nordstrom, right? I think they might have started in Seattle, but they were seen as extraordinary because they put the customer first. And, Nordstrom deserves a massive amount of credit for that. But think about what that means for all the other businesses and us as consumers. We accepted bad service. We accepted banker's hours. We accepted the fact that when you went to a lot of retail stores, what you hoped to get was something that came close to what you'd really like, instead of you being able to say, this is what I want. Who out there is going to compete for my money? So in a really short period of time, from whatever you want to call it, 10 to 25 years, there has been an unbelievable difference in how businesses operate, putting that customer first and giving themselves the ability to do it. Now, that's where I think part of what I've enjoyed so much about covering the tech industry has been how the tech players have started to step up to that. Because many of the tech companies before this said, hey, the customer stuff, that's not my domain. I just deal down here in the basement in the data center, and it has nothing to do with me. Well, now any technology company, whatever it does, has to be helping business people delight and dazzle their customers, or else they're going to be irrelevant.
Absolutely. When you're working with your clients, or even when you took on your roles at Oracle and SAP, how did you build out your digital strategy? What was that 1 year, 5 year plan?
I think, Rachel, there's so much stuff, right, for any of us individuals in our daily lives, right? You're bombarded with messages, ideas, images, news, fake news, social media, up, down, this, that, all day long. And there's got to be something for an effective, a relevant, and an engaging digital strategy that starts with simple things, which says, I as an individual might have a lot that I want to say, but I've got to frame what I say, how I communicate, what my digital conversation is in terms of what consumers want, customers want, what people find to be interesting. And I think the media industry, right, for a long time, they felt we're the ultimate gatekeepers of the truth. Well, it turns out they weren't. And it gave rise to things like blogging and social media and independent record labels, independent video labels, and people came to understand that each of us has the opportunity to shape the experiences that we choose to consume and to just box out everything else. So somebody who wants to build up a digital strategy about that has to understand that the people you're trying to reach, and I thought about this a lot, they've got infinite number of choices. And there's always going to be good, capable competition out there. So the way that you're going to use that digital strategy to be successful is you've got to be the world's best listener in order to be the world's best communicator. What do these people care about? What do they want to hear about? What gets their attention? What turns them off? Really weave that into everything that you do, whether you're a corporation or a very small business like mine is right now. But that truth remains the same.
That's super helpful. I think that's really good advice. What do you think with your teams? How do you get them excited about this? Big piece of digital transformation is empowering your own employees and that talent. What have you done or experienced or seen really great examples?
Yeah, sure, Rachel. There's a couple of things. One, I think that very broadly, one of the things that we do is, we try to explain and tell the stories about these unbelievable things going on in the world today. If you look at medical research, what's happening there, these diseases, these horrible problems that have just ravaged people for centuries now, those are being alleviated. And it's not just the diseases, but we can live better. We understand now how to remain more healthy, how to eat better, how to exercise better, how to detect problems early on. So from healthcare to the world of business to commerce to how, music and movies and education, how children are learning different things about the world as they grow up. If you can't get excited by that, is one of the things I tell people, then, check yourself for a pulse. So we try to celebrate these sorts of things that are going on in the world. And then the other part about it for those people, try to hire really smart people who are curious, who are willing to be great listeners before they're great communicators, and then get them to understand that this is a privilege that we have right now to be able to come in here and help tell these stories of what's going on in the world today. And then, Rachel, the last step of it is we agree on what we want to focus on, and then I try to keep the heck out of their way. There's no use hiring great people and then come in and micromanage them. Let them grow and prosper and spread out and build new skills. I think that's indispensable.
Oh, I love that. Especially when you have generational differences and you think about millennial, but really I think everyone needs to start thinking about the Gen Z, which is the newer generation. It is really important to let that younger audience feel like they have a purpose and empowered to make change. So that micromanaging piece could really break talent. And I just, from personal experience, I can see with that generational difference, there's a lot to be learned there too. And it takes empathy.
Yeah, that's a great point. The empathy and, just as the business world used to sort of move on these Newtonian, very mechanistic, rigid, linear paths, I think that employee engagement and interaction that you're just describing, from empathy to empowerment to autonomy, all of these different pieces play into it. But it has to go both ways. So you have to have, whatever you want to call it, management, experienced people with the company who are confident enough that they can offer good advice to people, but they don't have to smother them with it. And the newer people coming into an organization have to be able to say, I can bring a lot to this, but first I got to get to understand what's going on here. I don't know everything just yet. Maybe I will at some point, but not just yet. So give and take on both sides. I think an openness that lets people look past what's your age, how much experience do you have, where did you go to school, all that stuff. And instead, are we united in a common purpose here to do remarkable things that are going to bring great value to the people who consume our products and services? That to me is the key.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. So Bob, where do you think the next disruption is in the industry, or where are we going to be in 5-10 years?
Wow, Rachel, that's a good. I'd pull that in a little bit because I think, right, if you look back 5 years ago, 7 years ago, list of companies or capabilities that weren't, not that they weren't, robust and fully formed, they weren't around. And I think not only, so if you look out 5 years from now, the rate of change is increasing. So things over the next 5 years are going to be even more dramatically different. So I think, that the best companies out there are staying really laser focused on their customers, where they're going, what they're doing. I think people want to have a little bit more control of their time, a little bit more control of their lives and the pace of things, and not feel a little bit like they're on a treadmill or a rat on a treadmill where I don't have any control over my life. Life controls me. So I think all this stuff, from technology to greater understanding of the world around us, and the more information we have at our fingertips, I hope that, in large part, we all use that to try to identify the things that really matter and stay focused on those things. And we can spend more and more of our time on the things that make our heart beat faster and, bring joy to ourselves and others. And I think that some people choose to say, well, that's not the role of business, or that's not what you do as a professional. I disagree with that. I think it's just a matter of finding the right place that lets you do that, and not settle for places where you go and you feel like, oh my gosh, how am I going to last through another 8 hours at this place? That's hell on earth.
It is. That is. I saw you have written a little bit about AI and blockchain. I mean, I know they're starting to almost become buzzwords, but are you seeing some pretty massive opportunities there as well?
Well, the AI space has just been extraordinary, and I think everything from what's that old Disney movie? I think Tron, maybe 30 years ago, but it's about an electron and his adventures. And now today you've got these things of bots they're real, and they're becoming more and more commonplace. I'm going to lunch with my 3 favorite bots today because, they're the people I talk to most. It could get a little goofy. So AI is just, extraordinary. And I saw something that Microsoft did in the reorg a day or two ago, where one of the things Such said, he wanted AI devices and engagement. So it's not just get the AI into the stuff, the software, the hardware, the devices, but the power of what AI does in engagements. So that, I think, is the type of thing that, more and more companies are going to think about. With blockchain, Rachel, we're just seeing up and down the line here the opportunity to wring out extraordinary amounts of inefficiency, waste, those numbers, whether it's a third of the food that's grown and produced in the world goes to waste, largely because the means of getting it in the hands of people who want and need that food aren't available. So blockchain is one of the ways in which I think everybody up and down the line, from the food producers to retailers and others, are going to be able to help. What if you could take that number down from, a third to 20% to 15% to 10%? So these new technologies have unbelievable potential.
Very cool. Yeah. Okay. Well, what would you have if you had 3 kind of key takeaways or things for those listening to take away from this conversation? Bob, what would it be?
Rachel, one is, I think, each of us is in complete control of our own destiny. And don't settle for a job you don't like. Don't settle for doing things where you're looking at the clock and, well, Jesus, is 5 o'clock ever going to come? So that sounds easy to say, but I think for young people especially, there's so much joy, so much potential, so much opportunity out there to, explore your own path. I think as people flip that over into the business world as well, if you're going to be in business, you have to understand here, it's not so much about you, but it's about your customers and what goes on there. I think in the technology world, it's been interesting to see that companies are trying desperately to talk differently to the world about what they make and how they do it. And it's going to be an ongoing high challenge battle. And I think that's one of the reasons why I think Satya has been so successful at Microsoft. He speaks almost like a poet sometimes, this sort of elegant way of describing first what's going on in the world, and then he talks about here's maybe how Microsoft can have something to do with that. And I think as more businesses talk about that from the outside in instead of the inside out, it's going to be a much more interesting world.
100% agree. Fantastic. Well, Bob, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. People can find you on Twitter and LinkedIn and all over the place. So we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Rachel, thanks. This has been great. You're a wonderful interviewer and great subjects. And thanks for the opportunity to be part of your show.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review if you like what you heard. Join the conversation on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter at RK Bronstein and at MS Partner. And you can hear from more great speakers during Microsoft Inspire from July 15th to 19th in Las Vegas. Visit partner.microsoft.com/inspire for more information.